In the world of video games, there are thousands of titles. Some of them are huge household names like Super Mario Bros., and others are a bit more obscure. Somewhere in that mix are licensed games for cartoons and movies. While they aren't necessarily obscure, most of them are definitely more niche. If I showed you a Nicktoons game, you'd probably know the characters, and maybe you've played the game once or have seen it on a store shelf, but you probably wouldn't say it's up there with Zelda or Mario. I've played a ton of them myself though, and personally I would say some of them were the best of their time. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom was prolific enough that in the middle of the production of this video, it was announced that it's being remade for a 2020 release. That kinda blew my mind. That usually doesn't happen to games made with licensed properties. Clearly, that game is more popular than I once gave it credit for. There is one SpongeBob game though that came out before that one, and I had it as a young kid. It's definitely more obscure than Battle for Bikini Bottom, but I have heard its name once since those early days of my life, in a Did You Know Gaming video.
One SpongeBob SquarePants game was so flawed that it may have led to the closure of the studio that created it.
I remember always being intrigued by the developer's name and logo, even as a kid. I think it had something to do with the sounds that would play in the game's opening logo or something. But I never realized they never made another game. Ever since I first saw this video, the concept of this game shutting down that company bothered me. It always seemed off to me. I mean, I liked the game, but I never really bothered to do much research to see if this was true because I never really had a reason to. Since then, I've always thought about making a review video on the game, but I was always discouraged because people really didn't seem to like the game, and I'm not going to change anyone's minds with a simple review, so I decided against it. But one day, last February, the idea popped back up into my head, but with a new twist. What if I found out what really happened to BigSky Interactive? What if I could find enough research to tell their story? That would be a project I could be proud of, even if people didn't care about my opinion. Well, it took months of scouring the internet, talking to former employees, and plotting out a timeline, but I think I'm finally ready to share what I found. The events that led to BigSky's creation started in many different places, with many different people. Therefore, as you can probably imagine, finding a good place to start was not a simple task. But I believe I've found where to begin, in a little state called Texas. The year was 1998. Three gaming industry veterans, Tony Marone, Mark Day, and David Nielsen, had just founded a brand new audio-video production company that they were operating out of their own households. It was called Daylight Productions. You've likely never heard of them, but they were all more than qualified. Mark was no stranger to audio and video production. He had a degree in broadcasting and had spent 10 years as an editor and producer for ABC, Westinghouse Broadcasting, and another company he had owned, Nocturnal Aviation Group. Eventually, in 1993, he combined his love for gaming with his professional skills and started a new career at Electronic Arts, where he helped to create games such as Wing Commander 3 and 4. David was proficient in business, having earned his MBA and then went on to work as associate product manager for Pacific Bell. He eventually was promoted, but the idea of working with entertainment led him to leave and start a new job at EA as marketing product manager. He would later form Sim Systems in the hopes of creating games himself on top of selling them, and after that he was a software consultant, up until forming Daylight with his EA alumni. Tony was technically talented, with a bachelor in computer science to prove it, and after growing bored with developing business applications, he moved his family to Austin, Texas to become a programmer at Origin Systems. After assisting in the development of Wing Commander 3, and managing the development of Wing Commander 4, the prospect of the new DVD-ROM technology led him to co-found Daylight with the others. These three men seemed like a dream team, and they went on to help create titles such as the X-Files game, Madden 99, and Ultima Ascension. After a couple years of progress, they brought on a fourth member, an art contractor named Matt Scabilla, whom they had worked with at EA and Origin Systems on projects like Wing Commander Prophecy. Things only picked up from there, and they began to build their Austin studio, growing from 4 to nearly 40 employees. Daylight continued to take on new projects, such as developing EA Football Net, an online gaming service that provided matchmaking and tournament play for Madden 2000. They also built a game called Monster Force for Universal and Vivendi that was meant to be on the original PlayStation, but it was never published and their work for it was used in the GBA version later on. Eventually, they were able to develop their very own game for Windows, Swamp Buggy Racing. It was published by WizardWorks and released to the world in January 2000. Daylight had helped with the production of another racing game for WizardWorks in the past, but this one was developed entirely by them. It was based on a little-known sport that used swamp vehicles invented in Florida during the 1930s. The game's description boasted 16 unique vehicles and 2 separate tracks. The music was created by George Oldsney, whom they had worked with on other projects in the past. They were even endorsed by the North American Swamp Racing Association, which was the organization in charge of most, if not all, of swamp buggy races. When it was done, this little racer had been developed in only 4 short months. How was this possible? An engine they were given by a French partner company, Kalisto Entertainment. Kalisto Entertainment started as At-Read Concept in the year 1990. Its founder, Nicholas Gomme, was only 19 years old at the time. In the beginning, they worked to port games to Macintosh computers, and over the next couple years, they worked to build their own game creation technology. This to them was the cornerstone of their success going forward. By 1992, they were publishing their own games for Mac under the name Kalisto. Their work actually caught the attention of Apple themselves, who then made the decision to invest financially in At-Read. After so much success in such little time, they continued to believe the key was the technology they had created. With dollar signs in their eyes, they created a new multi-platform development engine, which they dubbed Libsys. They believed that this engine could seamlessly make titles for any platform they needed, and they bragged that Libsys could evolve with every new title. Nothing could go wrong, right? In 1994, At-Read Concept was purchased by Pearson, a British publishing company that was typically known for its educational media. At-Read Concept was now Mindscape Bordeaux, a new branch of Mindscape which was under the software Toolworks, who you may know for their weird educational Mario games such as Mario's Time Machine. As far as Mindscape USA, you may know them for the NES Terminator game, or their ports of Paperboy for the NES and Game Boy. During the next 2 years, Mindscape Bordeaux worked on games such as Pac in Time. This helped them grow and better understand their Libsys engine, which was now compatible with the CD-ROM format. But in 1996, Nicholas Gomme bought his company back and started over under a new company name, Kalisto Entertainment. They only grew stronger from there, opening new offices, hiring new people, and creating new games like Nightmare Creatures, Dark Earth, and Ultimate Race Pro. In the year 2000, they purchased a US production company, Daylight Productions. They were more successful than ever, but that success was not necessarily what it seemed. When Daylight was purchased by Kalisto, they became known simply as Kalisto Entertainment USA. Daylight had worked with Kalisto for a couple of years beforehand, as the French company wanted to work with an American dev team to get more recognition in the West. The employees at Daylight were not against the acquisition. They saw it as more of an obvious next step in their already established partnership, and it didn't hurt that Kalisto helped to fund a new office for them in California. What's more, Kalisto USA would operate as if they were a completely separate entity. Their accounts, contracts, and finances were entirely their own. Basically, they were still Daylight Productions with a new name. Kalisto France provided the engine they would use, and Kalisto USA would create the games. It seemed like a perfect partnership. At some point during this process, they brought on 2 more major employees, Stretch Williams, who became the Austin Studios' new manager, and Dave Downing, a consulting producer. In no time flat, Kalisto USA was working on their first project for Mattel, a movie tie-in for Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius. Licensed games were the foundation of the team's experience, so it was a good fit. Shortly after they began production, the project's publisher was shifted to THQ, who published all Nick games going forward for many years. At this point in time, things were moving along and everything was running relatively smoothly. They continued to work on Jimmy Neutron, but they caught word through the grapevine that THQ had another big 3D platforming Nickelodeon game that they were looking to find a team for. It was SpongeBob SquarePants. When they heard this news, everyone got excited. They were all big fans of the cartoon and would do whatever they had to get the contract for the project. A small group of employees, mostly artists, quickly got to work. With the technology from Kalisto France that they had been using for Jimmy Neutron, they created a complete, fully functional level of a SpongeBob game in only 2 weeks. It was an impressive accomplishment.
We had gameplay platforms, animations, a collection of items, and a working HUD. One artist, Damon Shelton, generated 11 character models in just 3 days. Janet O created the environments, and Tony Salvaggio animated SpongeBob. Fred Mizak, lead programmer on Jimmy Neutron, coded our demo.
The demo included SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, and Squidward animated models, as well as jellyfishing gameplay.
While the competition may have had a design doc or some models, maybe some superior to our quick work versions, we had a full playable demo working on the target platform in the form of a PS2 disc. Matt Skibilia, E3 2002.
This demo proved they had the talent and dedication, as well as the technology, but it was only enough to get them on the short list of potential developers. But they continued to persevere, and through a ton of negotiation and their quick response times, Kalisto USA won the day, and signed the deal to create the game while they also continued with Jimmy Neutron. It was around this time that another significant employee that worked at Origin Systems and EA joined the team, Billy Joe Kane. He would be the producer for the newly planned SpongeBob game. Getting the SpongeBob SquarePants license was a huge win for the USA team, but not all was well at Kalisto Entertainment. Kalisto USA's first milestones with SpongeBob were to create a game design that Steven Hillenburg and Nickelodeon approved of. They hired more designers and worked with THQ's production people to flesh out the overall theme of the game as well as the plot. As they got further into the rest of development, technical problems began to arise. The engine that Kalisto France had long believed was their holy grail was not actually as perfect as they made it out to be. The evolution with every new title was, in truth, just a fancy way of saying that they had to constantly change the engine code in order to actually do anything with it at all. The SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron teams were using this technology in ways that it wasn't meant to be used, so when they hit a roadblock, they had to ask Kalisto France to make changes to the engine code. USA had to constantly rely on France to make these changes, and as you can probably imagine, this was an incredibly flawed system. There were points where they couldn't even move forward without the updates from France, and France didn't seem to see how big of an issue this truly was.
As the deadline to finish approached, we were waiting on a drop from France. Just one particular aspect of it, and they didn't turn it in. So we called them up and nobody's answering, and we found out that they took the entire month of August off. We were like, what? That's just the way France does things apparently. So we were like, would have been nice to know. Billy Joe Kane, 2019.
This seems like a particularly poor decision, as it was clear at that time that Kalisto Entertainment France was in financial turmoil. The reality of their business practices began to show through the cracks. As we have already discussed, Kalisto France put a strong focus on their technology. Here's the thing though, they would take that technology to build demos for games, and they would then show that to investors to get money. And then they would hire someone else to actually make the games. Or sometimes not even make the game at all. It was a shady pyramid scheme, and it was crumbling down. Because France operated off the investments they got, it was difficult for them to continue getting paid over time.
They never made any money. They got investments. And so Kalisto started asking us for a piece of the money that we were bringing in. And we were like, haha, there is no piece. We have 25-ish people that we're trying to pay, so sorry, but no. Billy Joe Kane, 2019.
Kalisto France was unable to resolve these financial woes, and in April 2002, the company closed its doors for good, leaving the USA team with 2 unfinished products and uncertainty about their future. So Kalisto USA had a problem. Their parent company had burned down all around them, and they still had 2 projects that they not only had promised to complete, but also wanted to complete. It was a difficult decision, to be sure. Nobody wanted to see the group of hardworking employees disbanded, least of all the management and senior staff. So 5 of them got together to make a huge decision to save their team and the projects they had worked so hard on. Stretch Williams, David Downing, Tony Marone, Billy Joe Kane, and Matt Scabilia would take the ashes of Kalisto Entertainment and found a new company. Stretch would continue to be the main leader as CEO, while the rest would also keep their original positions while also having the responsibilities of owners. Together, they held an internal contest to decide what they would call themselves. There were several options they all liked, including one that ultimately came in second, Critical Mass Interactive. But one name in particular stuck more than the others. BigSky Interactive.
We developed in the central Texas region and lived beneath a huge sky. Even though Big Sky normally refers to Montana or somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, our internal contest for a company name resulted in Big Sky. We were formerly Kalisto USA, a subsidiary of Kalisto Entertainment out of Bordeaux, France, but found ourselves independent, hence renaming the company and the corporation. Matt Scabilia, 2019.
With the new name in mind, they began to review various images in order to create a logo to match. Matt Scabilia set the final composition, with a road to the horizon representing their new future, and bright sunlight peeking through the clouds to represent the spark of inspiration for the ideas that they were creating. In the meantime, a woman at the company named Wendy White was hard at work with her team, adapting the engine code from Kalisto into something more usable. The result was their new proprietary engine that they called ToonTech. It would be used to finish both SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron. They also created HorrorTech, which they planned to use on future projects once they were done with the existing contracts. Things didn't go 100% smoothly in the transition between companies, but THQ was mostly understanding of the situation, and they couldn't afford to switch devs at that point even if they wanted to. BigSky continued with development and tried to do everything they could to keep THQ happy. Not every one of THQ's wishes for SpongeBob could be met, however. With the deadline to finish rapidly approaching, some ideas had to be dropped entirely. Initially, THQ insisted that the GameCube version of SpongeBob needed to have some sort of functionality with the Game Boy Advance version, which was being developed by an entirely separate company, Vicarious Visions. They made it clear that this was a very important component to them, so the team at BigSky sat down and brainstormed ideas. In the end, they settled on using the GBA as a radar to find important treasure chests during certain segments of the game. You can still find evidence of this in the game's code to this day. The game's code also shows evidence of another GBA Link Cable idea, but this one came from Vicarious Visions, at least according to what I've been told by members of BigSky. It was meant to be some kind of minigame called Jellyfish Rodeo. There would be a special jellyfish tent in Bikini Bottom that when entered would let you ride a jellyfish. It seems you could also initiate the game in Jellyfish Fields, although it's unclear if the Jellyfish Rodeo tent was involved. Voice files still exist in the game that explain this a little bit better.
I don't remember this tent being here before.
The Jellyfish Rodeo must have left that tent behind the last time they were in Bikini Bottom. Perhaps it is still occupied.
A jellyfish wrangler. That must be the neatest job under the sea, except for being a fry cook. If only I could ride a wild jellyfish.
This is possible. You simply need to connect your GBA to your GameCube and insert the game pack for Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. Then, enter the tent to ride the jellyfish inside it. If your GBA is connected to your GameCube, but you don't have the game pack inserted, then you can at least see a radar whenever you go treasure hunting.
We can probably get an idea of what this minigame was like, seeing as a version of it still exists in the GBA game. There are also audio files for an NPC named Whirlpool, who would give instructions to the player on how to access this content.
Don't tell me you're one of those jellyfishers too. What kind of sissy fish uses a net to catch little ones? You gotta find the biggest one in the herd and ride it until one of you gives. Whirlpool will show you what I mean if you can bring me one Game Boy Advance. You've got enough Game Boy Advances for me, but there's still something you've gotta do, partner. Your own Game Boy Advance must be connected with your GameCube, and the game pack for Revenge of the Flying Dutchman must be plugged into it. If your Game Boy Advance is connected to your GameCube, but you don't have a game pack inserted, then you can at least see a nifty radar whenever you go treasure hunting. Now hit the trail. Stop wasting your time with those little jellyfish. Bring me one Game Boy Advance and Whirlpool will show you a real challenge.
While these features clearly made some progress, both BigSky and Vicarious were working under a crazy pace to get their respective games done, and these concepts were ultimately lost in the shuffle.
At the end, things started getting all fast, and although our team was small, just trying to make that kind of thing happen was not going to occur. I was really disappointed about it, but even then, we tried to get in touch with Vicarious. I'm sure just as much as they tried to get a hold of us. But nobody had time to communicate because they were so busy trying to rush to get their own products out. Billy Joe Kane, 2019.
As development continued, things became more and more tense. Everyone was on crunch time, and new issues would rear their ugly head more often than anyone could ever predict. One event happened during development that would shake everyone in the country to their very cores. On September 11th, 2001, Billy Joe Kane was driving into work when he flipped on his radio to hear reports of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He wasn't sure what to think about it, but as he got to the office and saw the whole thing on TV, he immediately sent everyone who came in that day home. As most people can imagine, it was a huge blow to morale. On top of that tragic incident, one of the lead designers on the game unfortunately lost his grandfather during production, and everyone obviously had to let him go be with his family and attend the funeral. The part that made that extra difficult, however, was that his grandfather lived in Japan, so this designer had to travel pretty far and be gone for a whole week. Apparently, this did not sit well with one of THQ's producers, who went completely ballistic when he learned that they had let this designer go to his own grandfather's funeral. This wasn't the first time THQ would cause BigSky grief, and it wouldn't be the last. It even got so bad at one point that BigSky could barely get THQ to pay them for the work they were turning in. The way payment was meant to work was every month when BigSky turned in their milestones, THQ would send the money to their bank account, but THQ liked to drag their feet. So much so that it would sometimes come down to the last hour before the bank closed. This obviously put a huge amount of stress on the members of the management group. They would be sitting in the conference room on the phone, begging THQ to send the funds until the very last minute. It was so bad at that point that management didn't even tell the rest of the team this was happening, because of the amount of stress they knew it would cause and how badly it would damage morale. So, needless to say, things between BigSky and THQ were strained. One day, the management team at BigSky received a call from Jeff Lappin, the CEO of THQ at the time. He cut straight to the point and laid his idea out on the table. THQ wanted to buy BigSky and make them one of their subsidiaries. BigSky didn't outright say no at first, and they gave it a great deal of thought, but after this deliberation, they decided they would rather remain independent for the time being. They had just gotten out of a messy situation with Kalisto, and they didn't think it was a good idea to have one company writing the checks, especially not THQ. They liked working with THQ to a degree, but they had so many issues with them that it seemed like a bad idea. So they told Jeff Lappin they were going to wait and see how things went for a while, basically saying, "No thank you, we want to go in a different direction." This seemed like it was fine at the time. Lappin acted like it was no problem at all, and hoped they would reconsider after SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron released. But this decision by BigSky would have drastic consequences in the near future. Even through all of the trials and roadblocks BigSky faced, SpongeBob Revenge of the Flying Dutchman and Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius finally were nearing completion and ready to be released to the world soon after. Some of their members attended E3 in July 2002 to promote their games, their company, and also talk about future projects they had in the pipeline, including another game from Mattel and a new IP they were creating themselves called Terminal Code. Things were looking good, they had a lot planned for the future, but something wasn't right. As SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron were almost done, BigSky started trying to get more projects moving forward. What was the issue? None of the companies they had made plans to work with were returning their phone calls. This seemed odd to them, but they decided they would finish what they were doing and try to deal with it when the two existing games were out the door. However, when they did finish, they still couldn't get anyone to call them back. This was a huge problem. If they couldn't get a new project, they were going to die. No projects meant no money, and after a while, management had to make the call and tell everyone what was going on. They wouldn't be able to get any extra money from any new projects, so they would have to survive off of SpongeBob alone, and they wouldn't get any more of that money until the game shipped, which was still going to be a few weeks away. Basically, BigSky Interactive was about to be out of business for good, and now they had a choice to make as an entire team. They could quit and go their separate ways, giving up on SpongeBob and everything they had been working on for the last couple of years, or they could finish the game with little to no pay, ship the final product, and put it on their resumes. Obviously, they chose the latter, and it was not even close to an easy task. Some people, unfortunately, had to be laid off immediately, and others could only work on and off. Somehow, though, they managed to pull it off, and on November 21st, 2002, SpongeBob Revenge of the Flying Dutchman released to the world. While much of the reception was positive, the critical reaction could be described as rough. Before we continue on that note though, I would like to take a few minutes to take a deeper look at the game itself, and explain it all in a little more detail. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman does some interesting things right from the get-go. Upon booting up the game, it tries to present itself as an episode of the cartoon, showing you a title screen reminiscent of the show while the game loads. From here, you'll find yourself in a playable menu. As a kid, I didn't pay it much mind, but looking back, this is actually an interesting choice. I can't really name another game I've played with a menu like this, besides maybe Jimmy Neutron, which was also made by BigSky. I'm sure there is one out there, of course, but for a 3D platformer based on a children's show, it really shows the effort that was indeed put into this game, even if some people like to say otherwise. Anyways, from this menu, you are given a few different options. You can start a new game at the grill, or load an existing game from the door to the dining area. Pretty standard stuff. At the condiment table, you can change your game settings, but all this really means is adjusting the audio and turning the rumble on and off. Not much to it, but then again, this was the early days of the PS2. What did you expect? And yes, I do realize I said PS2 and I'm playing on a GameCube, fight me. Then there's the final option at the cabinet, Extras. You don't necessarily see this much nowadays, but back then a lot of games would have trailers or concept art, or any other neat little thing placed on the main menu. Some games like Crash and Spyro even had full playable demos you could access with cheat codes. There's not much here, at least in the GameCube version I'm recording on, but it's still cool. There's a promo video labeled as hints and tips that was clearly made early on because it uses the original logo and not the final version on the box. It's not exactly giving you hints so much as showcasing different mechanics you will come across during your time with the game. You can also watch the credits and a slideshow of original concept art for the cartoon itself. I miss Steven Hillenburg, man. Real quick, even though this deep dive isn't about Jimmy Neutron, I thought it was important to point out that that game also has extras. They included scenes from the movie, a trailer for Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, and another trailer for an interesting looking Rugrats game. Now that I've over-explained the menu and extras more than anyone has any right to, let's start the game. We open with SpongeBob waking up from a dream, where Mr. Krabs had to close the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob passes this off as a ridiculous idea and jumps out of bed to go walk Gary. After you grab his pants, which function as the game's version of lives, you can exit the room where you'll find Gary at the front door. SpongeBob begins to tell Gary all about his dream, but gets cut off as Gary explains that he had a dream too, that something really bad was going to happen. A little ominous for a kid's game, but I digress. To cheer Gary up, SpongeBob says he will go grab Gary's favorite fetching stick. The game uses this as a way to teach you the mechanic of picking up items, which is actually a pretty important piece of many of the game's later challenges. You bring the stick to Gary and SpongeBob throws it out onto the lawn? He just kind of throws it, so we'll just pretend that the front door magically opened. It is a cartoon after all. Gary comes back not with the stick, but a box. It reads, Damsure, Donut Opien, or Elsie. SpongeBob knows this is clearly not threatening at all and smashes open the box to find another box, and then another box, and then an old bottle. All the while, doubloons are spilling out all over and being magically transported across Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob gleefully takes the bottle, excited to have hours of fun cleaning it. As he starts to rub the bottle though, the Flying Dutchman is released. He angrily asks who has awoken him from his slumber, and explains that anyone who releases him is obligated to join his pirate crew. SpongeBob points the finger at Gary in a moment of desperation, and the Dutchman says that he will be back to take Gary shortly. Feeling guilty, SpongeBob tells Gary that he's going to find a way to save him. And now we're off on this adventure. But first... This is the best part. I actually remember the first time I ever played this game. I got it Christmas Eve of the year it came out, and I vividly remember dying of laughter with my cousins when I discovered this feature. So from here, you're set free on the first of 7 worlds, Bikini Bottom, and your only guide is a checklist on the pause menu that gives you a list of challenges. Some of them are straightforward, like collect so many doubloons or catch so many jellyfish, but others are a little more vague, like jump up to the vista point. None of them are super confusing, at least in this section of the game, as the French narrator will usually chime in and explain the mechanics you need to accomplish these early tasks. When you complete one of these challenges, you will receive a letter tile. As you collect them, it becomes clear that they spell out SpongeBob's name, and once you have all of them, SpongeBob starts to spin around like a psychopath. You will then find yourself inside of SpongeBob's head, with a slide puzzle made out of the letter tiles. You have to complete the puzzle within the allotted time limit, and once you do, it reveals the location of a treasure chest. This is where the GBA would have been used as a radar if it had been implemented, but instead you are given a dowsing stick, and when you aim it in the direction of the treasure, your controller will vibrate. Once you find it, the chest will open to reveal a dirty sock? At first, this is a little bit confusing. What are you supposed to do with a sock? Well, this becomes more clear a little bit later. For now, the game returns you to SpongeBob's house, where you'll find that you're too late to save Gary. The Dutchman hypnotized him and dragged him off to join his crew. SpongeBob is upset, but also more resolved to save his pet than ever. Your only real choice from here is to go back outside, where you'll find Squidward waiting for you. He explains that Mr. Krabs has important news and needs them to get to the Krusty Krab as soon as possible. SpongeBob, who thinks this must be the announcement of Employee of the Month, challenges Squidward to race him there. This sounds like fun, right? A fast-paced race to rub it in Squidward's face? Yeah! Squidward is slower than dirt. Granted, he didn't really seem to care about the race in the first place, but I mean, come on, Squidward, at least try for once in your pathetic life. Believe it or not, Squidward can actually win if you dawdle around long enough. The only effect this has, though, is a different cutscene once you talk to Mr. Krabs.
Once again, we see that more legs doesn't mean more speed.
And once again, we see that more holes in your head means less stays inside of it. All right, you two, stop your jabbering!
See, Mr. Krabs, I told you SpongeBob would show up eventually. I sure hope you're not mad about having to wait, because then someone might not be picked as your employee of the month.
I can explain. Really, there was this accident and an earthquake, and then this big whirlpool opened up above me. Oh, please, Mr. Krabs, you've got to pick me for Employee of the Month.
Speaking of which, Mr. Krabs has bad news. Business has been too slow, so he has to close down the Krusty Krab until it picks up again. Not sure how it will pick up again if it's closed, but I'm not gonna question the old man. So SpongeBob's worst nightmares have been realized. The Krusty Krab is closed, and his closest friend has been kidnapped by a force that he set free. Squidward walks off to find a new way to make money, and Mr. Krabs goes in the kitchen to sulk. If you follow Squidward back to his house, you will find that he has set up a yard sale, and what's more, he's reading an interesting looking book called How to Defeat Evil Spirits. Wow, what a lucky break. Of course, Squidward refuses to let SpongeBob take a look at it though, so you have to steal it while he's napping. Once you get your hands on it, the French narrator reads it out loud, and you learn that the only way you can defeat the Dutchman is to collect his 7 lost treasures, like the gross looking sock. So now the goal is clear. You have to travel to the 7 different sections of the game: Bikini Bottom, Downtown, Sandy's Tree Dome, Jellyfish Fields, Chum World, Goo Lagoon, and the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. Then collect all the letter tiles to find the hidden treasure in those worlds. You'll do all sorts of things to collect letter tiles, like deliver food for Mr. Krabs in the perpetual night of downtown Bikini Bottom, catch hundreds of jellyfish in the green plains of Jellyfish Fields, and play giant putt-putt golf in the carnival wonderland of Chum World. Up until now, I've also failed to mention the costume system. There are 3 different outfits SpongeBob can wear besides the standard square pants that will help you complete certain tasks. The jellyfishing gear, which allows you to collect jellyfish as well as grab onto hooks that can carry you between platforms. The Mermaid Man suit, which lets you throw water balls at enemies and objects from a distance. This outfit was supposed to have a special move called the Whirlpool attack, but as Tony Salvaggio told me, it never really worked as an attack and we never got the effects to work. There were a few challenges to get the collision working, as well as making sure it worked well in the world and wasn't overpowered. Due to all these issues, the move wasn't approved by THQ and Nickelodeon and had to be cut. However, as you've seen, the prototype animation is still in the game files, as well as this voice clip of the French narrator explaining it.
Use the whirlpool attack to hit targets in all directions.
And then there's the Reef Blower, which you can use to roll spherical objects and spin pinwheels. The Reef Blower doesn't unlock until pretty late into the game, which means you need to backtrack to older worlds in order to complete some challenges. You can swap between each of these outfits and costume tents throughout the game. There's also the Treasure Hunter outfit and the Karate Gear, but you only get access to these during scripted events. The Karate Gear hides another interesting secret though. When wearing it during the karate fights, SpongeBob can perform M. Bison's Psycho Crusher attack from Street Fighter, and when idle he will do Bruce Lee's signature nose flick. Tony Salvaggio was the one responsible for sneaking these into the game. Actually, on the topic of the costumes, they present what I believe is one of the weirdest design decisions in the game. Most of the game's music is tied to them. If you wear the standard outfit, the main theme will play. But if you wear any of the other 3, the music will change. The only times this doesn't happen is in Chum World and the Dutchman's Graveyard, where the music is tied to the world, and during scripted segments like the tile puzzles and karate fights. This seems so odd to me because each of the music pieces tied to the costumes feel like they belong in specific worlds. The SquarePants tune feels right at home in Bikini Bottom. The Jellyfishing Gear song seems to belong in Jellyfish Fields itself. The Mermaid Man suit theme sounds perfect for downtown. And the Reef Blower music matches Goo Lagoon. I'm not entirely sure why they chose to do things this way, but based on what I've been told, it sounds like the team just thought it was a more exciting idea and less expensive than creating a track for every world, which I suppose is true since they would have had to make an entirely separate theme for Sandy's Tree Dome. Back on the topic of gameplay, as you collect each treasure, the Dutchman will hypnotize another one of SpongeBob's friends and force them into his pirate crew. So in the last level, the end goal becomes rescuing all of SpongeBob's friends, not just Gary, and fighting the Dutchman face to face. I won't go into much more detail than that though, in case you want to try the game out for yourself sometime. Everything I've just gone over is really grazing past a lot, but if I were to truly do a deep dive into the game itself and go over every single aspect, this video would be way longer than it needs to be. So instead I've given you the best summary that I can. Overall, the game is pretty enjoyable, at least in my opinion. It's not perfect. The controls and camera can be janky, and the enemies behave weirdly at times. Hey dude, where you going? And there's no shortage of bizarre moments, but in the end, the game is just fun, and really that's all a game needs to be. Fun. Also this.
Avast, matey! Who goes there? Be ye here to steal my booty?
Oh, believe me, I have no interest in touching your booty.
Now that is one loaded booty sack. Hold it right there, you thieving little scallop! Aren't you the one who's been digging around in my booty?
Oh, do you mean the booty stuffed in the crack of the ship? No, I don't know anything about that.
It was probably the Dutchman again. His booty is bigger than anyone's, but he still comes out here to get his hands on even more. He just can't get enough booty. That sack was so big, I could barely get my hands around all that booty. I could have sworn I saw someone who looked like you just before my booty was pinched. I used to love warming my booty in this place, but now I have no booty at all.
So if I understand this correctly, you wouldn't turn down some new booty, even if it came wrapped in dirty, old canvas.
Are you kidding me? Everyone wants more booty, no matter what package it comes in. And I'd much rather be playing with my booty than guarding this old cannon.
Guys, this is why BigSky shut down. I figured it out. I figured it out, you guys. Kids game. Yeah. Unfortunately, the game was not as well received among critics and other SpongeBob fans. Some players were critical of the game's tone and appearance, claiming the game's take on the cartoon's locations felt nothing like the show, and that the characters' interactions and the overall atmosphere seemed almost creepy in many ways. Many also thought the graphics were poor by the modern standard of the time. IGN gave a particularly scathing review.
SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman was obviously designed to appeal to the average fan of the cartoon series. My estimation defines them as the 5 and younger crowd, possibly autistic. Though, truth be told, its insane simplicity is sure to alienate any ADD-afflicted players, no matter how young they are. Anyone interested in purchasing SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman should consider a couple things. First of all, this game was designed to be enjoyable for young children, and maybe grown-ups with the same mental capacity. Secondly, the tasks and challenges are insanely boring and trivial. To ensure the game actually gets played, make sure the intentional gamer doesn't have access to anything better to do, including any video game that is not SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. Yes, preschool-aged kids will probably get a kick out of the game, though they'd likely be more entertained mowing down prostitutes in Grand Theft Auto. Mark Ryan Salee, IGN, 2002.
He gave the game a 4. I don't know about you guys, but I think someone was angry they had to work on SpongeBob. GameZone gave the game a more favorable review, a 7.5, praising the checklist system but criticizing the background design. Metacritic has the score at 66 out of 100, and Game Rankings has the GameCube version at 72% and the PlayStation version at 53%. Now if you're somehow unfamiliar with the game before watching this video, you may be asking why the PS2 version has a worse score than the GameCube version. Well, that actually gets into the biggest flaw of Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, and what most people believe to be the downfall of BigSky Interactive. So throughout the game, when you're traveling to another section of a world, you will see this short loading screen where bubbles will appear against a black background. On certain models of the PS2, there was an infamous loading glitch where the game would constantly freeze during these loading sections. This would obviously get very annoying, but the real issue is actually more serious than the game freezing. This glitch would also corrupt some players' save files or delete them entirely. As you can imagine, people were very upset by this, and who could really blame them? But the issue was not as widespread as some may lead you to believe. as the bug seems to be limited only to certain older fat models of the PlayStation 2, and none of the slim models. And the bug was seemingly quote-unquote fixed in the GameCube version. No one ever really knew the cause of the loading glitch. BigSky themselves didn't even know about it until long after launch, and had they known about it, they never would have sent it out. However, while there is no way I can prove this for a fact, I think I might have unintentionally learned the cause of this loading glitch while having a conversation with Billy Joe Kane about the various issues BigSky faced during development.
Now I can tell you something about the tech end problems. One of the things that really bothers me is you couldn't play it on a backwards compatible PS3, and I can tell you why. We were trying to get approval through Sony, and Sony had this draconian policy, at least at the time on PS2, that if your game takes more than 6 seconds before something moves on the screen for a load, they'll fail it. So some of our level loads took about 7 seconds, and Sony was like, it's not gonna work. We will shut you down and you'll never print. And we were like, okay, well we can do it the long way, which is to rewrite everything to make sure that it does that, or we can do it the way that worked on many other games, which was you do I guess they call it a soft reset. So you would save off where you are in the game and basically reset the PlayStation, and that could happen faster than it would be to load one of our levels. So we did that, and basically that means it won't run on any sort of hardware emulation. So yeah, nobody would be able to make it work on a PS3 because we used a little stupid trick that only worked on that hardware. Billy Joe Kane, 2019.
Now, when Billy explained this to me, I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought it was interesting for sure, as I never realized the PS2 version could not be emulated. But the more I reflected on this anecdote, something occurred to me. They only had to use this soft reset trick on the PS2 version, and the glitch only occurred during the exact same loading screens they were trying to shave down. People assumed that the glitch was fixed in the GameCube version, but I know from my interviews that BigSky didn't even know about the glitch, so they wouldn't have known to go back and fix it. So I don't think the bug even existed in the GameCube version. I think that the bug is caused by this soft reset tactic that they used to get Sony to approve the game without killing their employees by making them go back and rewrite everything. Now again, I can't say this for a fact, it's just my own personal theory as the circumstances seem to line up. And it's also important to point out that that bug was not at all put there intentionally, even if the soft reset did cause it. As I've said prior, most people believe the loading glitch and the game's overall quality were the cause of BigSky shutting down shortly after its release. But is this true? Well, I am here today making this entire video to tell you that this is absolutely and unequivocally false. SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman had nothing to do with BigSky's closure, and BigSky pretty much knew they were done for before the game had even shipped. Remember when I told you about how BigSky was having trouble getting companies to call them back as they were finishing up with SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron? Well, like I stated before, unfortunately they never did get any more calls, and eventually the money ran out. Management worked to find everybody jobs. They sold all their computers so that one person didn't have to take all of them. They had a silent auction for the company car, and in the end, after paying everyone, they wound up with around $1,200, which they used to throw a party. It was a bittersweet end to the roller coaster they had been through over the last couple of years. But it wasn't all for nothing. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman went on to win Favorite Game at the 2003 Kids' Choice Awards, against the likes of Mario Party 4 and Harry Potter, which the members of BigSky are still proud of to this day. The game actually has a small speedrunning community with their own leaderboards and Discord. As of the creation of this video, the current world record holder for any percent is a user named Ferris with a time of 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 30 seconds. The current 100% record holder is user Cornbread Muffins with a time of 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 7 seconds. Together, the community has made a list of all known glitches in the game, but for one community member, Cosmeme, this was apparently not enough. In December of 2017, Cosmeme posted 2 glitch bounties for $50 each on Reddit. The first of these bounties was for a way to collect the Reef Blower costume early. The second was for a way to initiate the final letter tile in Shumworld before you're supposed to. Apparently, this Reddit post was a big enough deal that it caught the attention of one Polygon writer, Allegra Frank, who wrote an entire article on the subject.
Cosmeme, a member of the Revenge of the Flying Dutchman speedrun community, took to Reddit this week with a challenge. The first person, or people, to execute one of the 2 glitches that, in theory, should vastly shorten playthroughs of the game will receive $50 in exchange for their findings.
I decided to offer a bounty for the 2 strats for a couple different reasons.
Cosmeme told Polygon.
Mainly, our smaller community was having trouble with them, so a bounty would get a couple of new faces in to help us out with them.
Uncovering these solutions wouldn't just benefit Cosmeme and his fellow SpongeBob fans who are constantly trying to break a game that he admits isn't all that good, he explained. It would also help to promote Revenge of the Flying Dutchman as a speedrun for even non-players to enjoy, a reputation earned by certain better-known SpongeBob games.
The reason why Return of the Flying Dutchman has had a spark in growth over the last months is its poor design choices and its ability to be broken, which has much potential for an entertaining speedrun,
said Cosmeme, who's been toying with the game for about 2 months.
The main reason why more people pay attention now is that they are just really entertaining.
As far as I am aware, these glitches were never found and the bounties were never claimed. From what I understand, after a bit of drama, Cosmeme left the Revenge of the Flying Dutchman speedrunning community around a year later. Speedrunners aren't the only people who still play the game or look back at it fondly. Although it is one of the most niche titles around today, you'll still hear people mention it from time to time on various sites and platforms, asking for it to be remade or just reminiscing about their childhoods. Sure, maybe nostalgia is a bit blinding when it comes to this game, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. In a society and community that's mostly made up of negativity and cookie-cutter opinions, the mind of one's inner child is nothing but positive. When you can see the good in something, even through its flaws, however many there may be, well, I just don't think that can possibly be wrong. If more people were willing to see the good in a game, or a movie, or even a person, instead of writing it off for one flaw or one mistake, well, I think Twitter would at least be a better place. And I'm not saying that when there's an obvious issue or oversight, you shouldn't express your opinion that that thing is bad. Games have made changes for the better because fans said something, and I don't think that is entitled or anything. I'm just saying that we don't have to dwell on the negative and look at the good parts too. And maybe when a game is nearly 2 decades old and someone likes it because it's important to their childhood, let's just let them like it instead of insisting that it sucks. So, one lingering question still remains. Why wouldn't anyone call BigSky back after acting like they were prepared to work together? Well, do you remember how the CEO of THQ at the time, Jeff Lappin, wanted to buy BigSky out and the team decided against it? Well, Jeff went on to work at a different company, and one former member at BigSky had a friend who happened to work at that same company. Jeff was not aware that this friend knew anyone who used to work at BigSky, and one day during a board meeting, he started to brag about some less than admirable actions. He told everyone in that room that he didn't like that BigSky didn't want to join THQ, so he blacklisted them. They'll never work in this industry again, he said. So again, BigSky's closing had nothing to do with SpongeBob, or the team's previous work. It was one entitled executive that decided if they didn't want to be owned by his company, he didn't want them to succeed. So he blacklisted them without warning, and then let them slowly die out. Unfortunately, that's just how things go sometimes. It's not always the things that seem obvious on the surface. It's the politics and the agenda of those behind the scenes. And sadly, the rumor of how one SpongeBob game destroyed a company will continue to persist, whether it's due to few people seeing this video or because the real story isn't as interesting as the one that currently exists. In a way, BigSky's foundation lived on many years after its closure, as just 1 month later, Matt Scabilia and Billy Joe Kane took some of their old employees and founded Critical Mass Interactive, taking the runner-up name from the contest they held after Kalisto went under. It was at this new company that they would work on big properties such as Epic Mickey, Tron Evolution, and Ultima Online. THQ gave future SpongeBob projects to Heavy Iron Studios. And funnily enough, the CEO of Heavy Iron, Lyle Hall, used to be the senior game designer at Kalisto Entertainment USA. I am so happy to finally share this story with you, and I have one final message for you, the kids and adults who played these games, from the members of what was BigSky Interactive.
Thank you for enjoying our work. Thank you for finding fun and adventure in our efforts. And sorry that everything wasn't all you expected it to be, either technically or in gameplay. Our goals were for complete perfection, but realities of budgets, schedules, and other outside reasons always get in the way. All of the developers you know or ever heard of at every company in the world were doing and are doing their very best to give you wondrous adventures and fun. We are all kids, just like you, who want to build worlds and play in them.
I think the best way I could possibly wrap things up is with these words.
The real story of BigSky is one of inspiration and dogged determination. Overcoming admittedly daunting odds, Austin-based BigSky rose from the ashes of Kalisto's bankruptcy and, in the face of stiff competition, succeeded in landing one of the most popular licenses today, Melody Cambrin E3 2002.
power.